Right, make yourself comfortable in your chair. And our usual start, just rubbing your hands together. And then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. And one shoulder. Your arm. Other side. And the upper part of your chest. Gently on your belly. Sit back. With your weight dropping into the chair. Some of the tightness and stiffness in your body just beginning to gently drain away. Your breath just calming slightly, just settling into a nice, steady, smooth rhythm. And with all of that, your thoughts just beginning to coalesce a little bit, to gather around those sort of anchor points of posture and breathing, just a general awareness of your body. Maybe just able to release some of the tightness, stiffness that you feel in different parts of your body, not with this posture. As we go through the different movements and different postures. Now bringing your feet in. Weight coming forwards a little bit. And just feeling the response in your legs, that little bit of a give and then the push back. As you might get, if you sink into a chair, you may sink down into the chair, you feel yourself dropping down and then being sort of held up. That feeling in your feet, in your legs, buttocks, hips, lower back. Supporting your upper body and allowing further release of tightness, and that feeling of a kind of push up, that upward lifting, able to just gradually move up through your belly, solar plexus and chest. So we feel this two-way movement in the body, the gentle pull of gravity through our body, and say, for instance, pulling on our ribs, our hips, and that lift up. So already, even as we sit in this outwardly still posture, we're aware of a very fundamental cycle of movement. Turning your head. So that downward and upward movement provide the basic sort of dynamic that is going to give energy to the rest of the body and the rest of the movements that we make. And the translation of that very basic movement into the different patterns is a combination of intent in our minds and producing the change through the center of the body physically. And then your shoulders. Going back the other way. Hands out to your sides. And then winding all the way around. Back the other way. Rest your hands. Easing forwards. So try and keep the focus of your attention while you're going through these very familiar movements. It's very easy to drift off one way or another because they're so familiar and very straightforward. But what we really want to do is to use them as a tool to really train our attention to notice quite small, subtle movements and changes within our body. So we become very sensitive towards those. And then turn a little. Turn towards the other leg. So as you go forwards, you can feel that increase in pressure in the legs. And this time, just stay there and don't go all the way around, but just gently swing from your hips so your head goes from side to side. And you can feel the shift of the weight, the transfer of the weight from one foot to another. And then this time, go back into the hips and then across, so it becomes a full circle. And back the other way. Come back to the central position, raising one heel and then push out with the foot. Remember, just take a moment at the end of the step to press gently into the floor. And then on the other side. Going back to that. One quite useful way to really keep your attention focused is to count how many of each exercise that you do. And this is why you often see in sort of Tai Chi and Qigong, when there's a set of movements, often the instruction will be to do 4 of each or 6 of each or something like that. There's no particular reason why it should be 4 or 6. It's just a figure that somebody's decided it's always an even number, of course, because you do on both sides. And you will lose count. I always lose count, but at least it's something that helps to focus on. Now you're doing this one. Now you're doing that one. So we'll try that. We're doing before of each exercise. And as I say, I will probably lose count, but it can add a little bit of definition to the set of movements. It's quite useful, again, particularly when it's fairly familiar movements. So starting with your weight back, hands turn palm forwards and knees forwards. And then back. And then fisherman castanet. And now rolling the ball. and pigeon spreads its wings. Pushing a wave. Now, back to pigeon spreads its wings and that little sequence 4 times through that. So pushing a wave. And then punching with both fists. So one more round of this. And then changing. And change. Wild goose. Heart in the clouds. Still trying to keep to a count of 4 of each exercise. I tend to apply the count at the end of the movement. So this is number 2 coming up now. The hands come down. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So for this one, I would count both sides as 1. So you essentially one side and then the other, and that's 1 round, and so on. So 1 more round. And then pushing in 2 directions. One more of these. And then we'll do the 4 directions. So starting as always with the push up. Turn. So one last round of this. Now scooping the sea and looking at the sky. And then grasping the tiger's ears. Okay, switch sides again. Back to scooping the sea. Good, and grasping the tiger's ears. Okay. So that was full beach exercise, I think. It was about 15 minutes. So one thing that the counting does is it enables you to sort of time things. So you know how long you're going to be spending. It can be a bit difficult just doing an exercise open end. It's like, well, when shall I stop? Should I move on? Whatever. And because there's a limited number, somehow it makes you sort of it gives you a framework for the focusing. The idea is not to train yourself to get good at counting. It's not a mathematics exercise. You will lose count. I'm sure I did lose count at some point, but it's something. It's another kind of focal point to come back to, and helps to define this session a little bit. I'm not saying it's good to do it all the time, but it can be quite a useful thing to do. And I think one of the things about Tai Chi forms, when those who encountered Tai Chi forms, is that, as my first teacher used to say, they're a kind of complete package. So you kind of know what's going to happen. You start, you go through the form, you finish. You know how much space it's going to take, roughly how long it's going to take, and so on and so forth. Whereas, and he said, well, I'm going to do some exercise. Like, well, what should I do? How should I go about this? And kind of what's the how long should I do an exercise for, or whatever. That all of that can sometimes be a distraction. Okay, so just moving your weight forwards and backwards again. And hands in front of your shoulders and just bringing your elbows over as you do. And adding a little turn, so you go one way and then the other, building slowly into bear play. A smooth feeling of movement in the back and your shoulders, which you want to try and maintain when you come to the full exercise. And it's straightforward enough to do that if you've got this movement. It's just your hand coming out. I'm not counting now, by the way. The reason why you shouldn't, if you wanted to count this exercise or any of the others. Now this time, pull back a little bit and then go into hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. So you're going to cross back to the center, across. Cow gazes at the moon. And turn your hands in to hold the ball. And just carrying the ball around in a smooth circle. Not forgetting to turn in your hips, your waist. And then back the other way. Okay. Now the archer. Good. And let your hands rest down. Okay, and once again, rubbing your hands together. Your face. Over your head and neck. Down to on the shoulder. And your arm. The other side. Upper part of your chest. Belly. And relax. Lovely, and then standing. So feet hip width apart and just rocking your weight forwards and backwards, a little bit soft in your knees and your hips. And roughly from the front part of your heel to the ball of your foot on each side, just feeling that slight change of pressure, the response in the arch of your foot, the big muscles there, the base of the foot. And it's worth noting that I'll show you with this, so I think it's easier to see. If this were going up to the middle of my body, then the top of the pole, if you look at how far it's moving, it's a fair distance there. But if you look at the lower part of the pole where it touches the ground, it's only moving a very small distance. And that's without anything happening here. I mean, it's just a piece of wood. It's not stretching. It's not flexing its muscles or doing anything. It's just moving. So, you know, I'm sure there's a mathematical formula that would tell you what the difference was. Point is that little bit of movement that you're making is producing quite a big effect as it progresses up through your body and down into the arms. This time, letting your arms follow. Imagine doing this in water, swaying in the river. So there's that little bit of resistance. You feel going forwards, your arms coming through just afterwards, and then you feel the resistance against your back, and again your arms coming back. It's quite soft. Try not to do this. Stiffen up in your knees. As though your pelvis swings almost as a kind of counterweight to the head. You know, again, I'll show you with a smaller stick this time. If where my hand is the hips, and this is the pelvis down below. When my head goes forwards, my pelvis would go back. But what would happen is, because it's articulated, it would also tilt. So you'd have that kind of effect going on. An example that there's always a counterbalancing movement. And then a development of this is as you go forwards this time, rather than just going forwards, your arms come up and you feel sort of lengthening through your back. You may find that the heels come off the ground through the expansion up through the front of the body as well. So you're lifting something up, like a wave coming up from underneath. And then down, and this time your elbows go out a little bit and then coming up. If you can comfortably raise your heels off the ground, that gives you a little bit more of an idea of the lift, the energy that comes from that. But if it makes you feel very wobbly, obviously it's not a useful thing to do. Maybe just try it once or twice. So here's like there's a ball here, and we're squeezing the ball in and then sliding our hands underneath and lifting up. As your heels do come up, still feel, you know, if you're doing that, it helps if you can still feel your hips dropping back. And we're going to change from this to rooting down. So that's very similar in some ways, but no movement of the weight. So this time, let your weight settle behind the ball of each foot and lifting straight up and pressing down. One more time. And then wild goose. And heart in the clouds. One foot forwards. Transferring your weight. Remembering to give yourself that little bit of time and space for settling down. And again, just thinking back to when we were doing the counting, one of the things that can do is actually really help you to get a sense for that stillness, that space, within the movement, because suddenly you're not hurrying. You're not, oh, what's the next exercise going to be? Because you're only on two or three or whatever. And that can have a rollover into other exercises, even when you're not doing the counting. And in that stillness, that's when you sink into the ground in this exercise. And it's also as you sink in, as you settle in, when you raise your toes. And stepping in. Chin sides. Raising your toes and your heel. And then stepping in. And a few steps. And then in the other direction. Have your first foot forwards and then hands at your sides. Winding around. Now fisherman cast the net. and pushing a wave. And then just going through these in sequence, doing sort of connecting movements up in this way is another good way of getting a different focus of attention. Being a little bit alert to the changes. Again, it's not the end of the world if you miss one. One more round. And switch sides. And then change. And change. And then in sequence. One last round. And bring the feet down. Give it a shake. Lovely, find your chair again. So once again, just sitting comfortably. Weight slightly forwards, hips sinking into the chair. Your hands drop down. Put the weight of your arms on your shoulders. And then embrace tiger, return to mountain. and rest. Lovely. That went very quickly. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
So